Marcus Rodriguez stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately wanted to go home. The Galactic Harmony Embassy on Station Zenith 7 looked like someone had crossed a luxury resort with a meditation retreat, then decided it needed more crystals. Lots more crystals. "Welcome, welcome." Ambassador Flixner glided toward him, all four arms spread wide in what Marcus assumed was supposed to be welcoming. The Zentorian looked like a lavender starfish that had learned to walk upright and developed an unhealthy obsession with diplomatic protocol. "You must be our new security consultant from Earth. How wonderfully exotic." Marcus winced. He'd specifically requested they not use the word exotic in his presence. "Just Marcus is fine, Ambassador. I'm here to assess your current security arrangements." "Oh, how delightful. Though I must say we've never needed much security here. The embassy has maintained perfect peace for over 70 standard years." Flixner's voice carried that special kind of pride that made Marcus's danger sense start tingling. Chief Security Officer Vex approached with the measured stride of someone who took regulations very seriously. The Klaxonian stood 7 feet tall, had skin like polished obsidian, and carried what appeared to be a ceremonial staff that probably couldn't stop a determined butterfly. "Security Consultant Rodriguez," Vex announced in a voice that could have been generated by reading a manual aloud. "I have prepared a comprehensive briefing on our current protocols. We maintain a staff of 6 decorative guards, 12 ceremonial barriers, and 1 very stern warning sign." Marcus looked around the main embassy hall. Soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and enough open sight lines to make a sniper weep with joy. The walls were mostly transparent aluminum, because apparently privacy was less important than looking pretty. Multiple entrances, 0 cover, and what appeared to be a decorative fountain positioned exactly where a defensive choke point should be. "This is beautiful," he said carefully. "It really captures that please assassinate everyone inside aesthetic." "Thank you." Flixner beamed, missing the sarcasm entirely. "We spent considerable resources ensuring the embassy project's peace and openness to all species." Marcus pulled out his tablet and started making notes. After 30 seconds, he'd identified 17 major security vulnerabilities. After 60 seconds, he'd stopped counting. "So," he said, looking up from his rapidly filling screen, "when was your last actual security assessment?" Vex consulted his own tablet with the reverence of a priest reading sacred text. "According to records, never. The embassy's peaceful reputation has always been considered sufficient protection." "Sufficient protection," Marcus repeated slowly. "Right. And when was the last time someone actually tried to attack this place?" "Well, there was that unfortunate incident last month when Senator Quiblex accidentally knocked over a display case," Flixner said thoughtfully. "But we've since moved all breakable items to safer locations." Marcus felt a headache coming on, and he'd only been here 5 minutes. This was going to be a long assignment. 3 days later, Marcus had compiled a security report that was longer than most species' constitutions. He'd also started making what he diplomatically termed basic improvements to the embassy's defensive posture. Motion sensors in the ventilation shafts. Ambassador Flixner studied Marcus's proposal with the expression of someone trying to understand quantum physics through interpretive dance. "But surely that's excessive? We've never had problems with people crawling through our air ducts." "That's because nobody's tried yet," Marcus explained patiently. The key word being yet. These sensors are practically invisible and completely silent. Think of them as preventive medicine. Vex nodded approvingly. Preventive measures are consistent with proper protocol. However, I must note that the installation of surveillance equipment requires Form 47B, submitted in triplicate, with appropriate signatures from. Or, Marcus interrupted, "We could just install them and call them environmental monitoring systems for air quality." Very diplomatic. But while Vex wrestled with this philosophical challenge to his worldview, Marcus had already started working with the embassy's maintenance crew. Pip, a 3-foot-tall Glorbanian who looked like an enthusiastic orange furball, practically vibrated with excitement at every new piece of equipment Marcus brought in. Ooh, what's this one do? Pip bounced on his 6 legs as Marcus unpacked a discrete camera system. These are aesthetic enhancement devices, Marcus said with a straight face. They help us appreciate the embassy's beauty from multiple angles simultaneously. Chief Engineer Tornak, a massive hegemony drone who communicated primarily through disgusted grunts, examined the camera housing with professional interest. Despite his perpetual bad mood, Tornak was the most competent engineer Marcus had worked with in years. HMPsh. Decent build quality. Better than most Federation garbage, Tornak rumbled, which from him counted as enthusiastic praise. Within a week, Marcus had transformed the embassy's security without technically changing anything. The motion sensors were air circulation monitors. The reinforced blast shutters were sunlight regulation panels. The emergency lockdown system was a crowd management protocol. The interesting part was how often these systems activated for completely innocent reasons. In his first week alone, Marcus's air circulation monitors detected 3 separate individuals attempting to access the embassy through unconventional means. His sunlight regulation panels deflected 2 projectiles that someone later claimed were celebration fireworks despite the embassy not hosting any celebrations that day. You know, Ambassador Flixner mentioned during their weekly briefing, we've had remarkably good luck lately. 3 different accidents that could have been quite serious, all avoided by random chance. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Funny how luck works, isn't it? Almost like the universe is looking out for us. Vex had begun to notice patterns in their lucky breaks but seemed genuinely puzzled by the correlation. It is statistically improbable that we would experience such a high frequency of near-miss incidents immediately following the installation of our new environmental systems. Probably just coincidence, Marcus said. Though maybe we should keep those systems running, just to be safe. The other embassy staff had started adapting to Marcus's presence with varying degrees of success. Most seemed to view him as a harmless eccentric who occasionally made helpful suggestions about furniture placement and emergency procedures. What they didn't realize was that Marcus's helpful suggestions about furniture placement had created clear fields of fire from every defensive position. His emergency procedures were actually combat drills disguised as safety training. And his habit of reorganizing supply closets had resulted in strategic caches of emergency equipment throughout the embassy. But hey, nobody had complained about the improved efficiency of their daily operations, so Marcus figured he was doing something right. By month 2, Marcus had convinced the embassy administration that their facility needed what he termed aesthetic upgrades. The key was presentation. Never mention words like weapons or fortifications. Instead, everything was about artistic expression and cultural appreciation. These kinetic sculpture gardens will really enhance the embassy's artistic profile, Marcus explained to a gathered crowd of diplomats, gesturing toward what were definitely not automated defense turrets. Each piece represents the dynamic nature of galactic harmony through interpretive motion. The sculptures were beautiful in a sleek, menacing sort of way. They rotated smoothly on their bases, tracking movement with what appeared to be artistic curiosity rather than targeting systems. When they weren't tracking potential threats, they displayed complex light patterns that were genuinely mesmerizing. Remarkable craftsmanship, murmured cultural attaché Blixen, a thin vegan whose species had apparently evolved from very aesthetic-minded insects. The way they follow visitors suggests a form of interactive art. Quite engaging. Marcus kept his expression neutral. The turrets were following visitors because they were programmed to identify and track potential threats, but if everyone wanted to interpret that as performance art, then who was he to argue? The real breakthrough came when he met Captain Zara Nightwhisper, the Void Elf liaison who had recently joined the embassy staff. Void elves looked exactly like fantasy elves, except they'd traded their connection to nature for an overdeveloped sense of drama and a tendency to speak in theatrical whispers. I know what you're really doing, she said quietly, materializing beside Marcus as he supervised the installation of yet another decorative sensor array. Marcus didn't even twitch. Years of combat training had taught him not to react to surprises, even when they involved 7-foot-tall elves appearing out of thin air. "I'm improving the embassy's aesthetic appeal," he said mildly. "Very important for diplomatic relations." "These are military fortifications disguised as art installations," Zara whispered dramatically. "You're turning this place into a fortress." "That's a very creative interpretation of interior design," Marcus replied. "But if you're concerned about the embassy's security, I could use someone with your particular skills to help with staff training." Zara's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that usually preceded either heroic actions or catastrophic mistakes. "You want to train diplomats in combat?" "I want to train diplomats in emergency response procedures," Marcus corrected. "Very different thing. Much more diplomatic." Within days, Zara had become Marcus's unofficial partner in what they euphemistically called crisis preparedness seminars. The embassy staff learned how to take cover during seismic events, how to move efficiently through the building during evacuation drills, and how to use everyday objects for personal safety in emergency situations. Ambassador Flixner proved surprisingly adept at what Marcus definitely did not call close-quarters combat techniques. "This is quite invigorating," the Zentorian announced after successfully demonstrating a defensive maneuver. "I feel much more confident about handling unexpected diplomatic situations." Vex approached the training with his usual methodical precision, treating each technique like a regulation to be perfectly memorized. "Protocol for Emergency Response Scenario 7 Alpha has been successfully integrated into standard procedures," he announced after mastering what was absolutely not a disarming technique. Even Tornak participated, though he grumbled constantly about soft diplomatic types needing to learn proper hegemony combat protocols. As it turned out, hegemony drones were bred for engineering and warfare, which made Tornak unexpectedly useful for Marcus's plans. The month ended with Marcus's first major test. During the signing of a minor trade agreement between two historically peaceful species, his perimeter sensors detected an approaching object that definitely wasn't on the embassy's visitor schedule. The explosion happened exactly where the ceremonial podium would have been, if Marcus hadn't suggested moving it to a more photogenic location behind several layers of reinforced barriers. The blast scattered harmless debris across the main hall while the actual ceremony continued safely in what used to be a storage room, and now served as an impromptu bunker. "Well," Ambassador Flixner said as emergency responders cleaned up the wreckage, "that was certainly unexpected. How fortunate that we moved the ceremony for better lighting." Marcus nodded gravely. "Lighting is very important for these diplomatic occasions." Nobody mentioned that the lighting adjustment had saved everyone's lives. But Marcus noticed Vex looking at him with something approaching understanding. 3 months into Marcus's assignment, the embassy received the honor of hosting the Grand Unification Ceremony, a diplomatic event so prestigious that half the galaxy's leadership would be attending. It was exactly the kind of high-profile gathering that Marcus had been dreading since his first day. "This is wonderful." Ambassador Flixner practically glowed with excitement. Representatives from over 200 species, all gathered to celebrate galactic harmony. What could possibly go wrong? Marcus had prepared a list of exactly what could go wrong. It was 17 pages long and included scenarios ranging from simple assassination attempt to coordinated terrorist assault to accidentally starting an interstellar war through improper seating arrangements. "I'm sure it'll be fine," he said diplomatically, "though we might want to implement some additional crowd control measures, for aesthetic purposes." 2 days before the ceremony, Marcus's sensor network picked up something that made his blood run cold. Not 1, not 2, but 5 separate groups were converging on the embassy simultaneously. Different species, different methods, different motivations, but all with the same goal: turn the Grand Unification Ceremony into the Grand Unification Massacre. Vex, Marcus called the chief security officer aside. "We need to talk. Privately." They met in what used to be a supply closet and now served as Marcus's unofficial command center. Screens showed feeds from dozens of concealed cameras, sensor readouts, and tactical displays that definitely weren't supposed to exist in a diplomatic facility. "This is highly irregular," Vex said, staring at the displays. "These monitoring systems far exceed anything in our official security protocols." "Yeah, well, our official security protocols wouldn't stop a determined hamster," Marcus replied grimly. "Look at these patterns. 5 different approach vectors, all timed for maximum impact during tomorrow's ceremony." Vex studied the data with growing alarm. "You're suggesting coordinated hostile action against the embassy?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that tomorrow, this place is going to turn into a war zone, and we're the only thing standing between 200 galactic leaders and a very bad day." For the first time since Marcus had known him, Vex looked genuinely rattled. "But our peaceful reputation is about to become our epitaph if we don't act fast." Marcus pulled up building schematics overlaid with defensive positions. "The good news is, I've been preparing for this since day one. The bad news is, we're about to find out if I prepared enough." The next morning dawned with deceptive calm. Delegates arrived in their ceremonial finest, chattering excitedly about the historic significance of the day. The embassy's main hall had been transformed into a glittering showcase of galactic diplomacy, with representatives from every major species mingling peacefully. Marcus stood at his post, watching the crowds through his network of concealed cameras. Every smile felt like a countdown timer ticking toward disaster. At precisely 14:30 local time, during Ambassador Flixner's opening remarks about unity and peace, the first attack came. The explosion that should have collapsed the main entrance instead met reinforced barriers disguised as decorative columns. The armed figures who burst through what should have been vulnerable access points found themselves facing automated defenses camouflaged as kinetic art installations. "What in the name of diplomatic protocol is happening?" Ambassador Flixner shouted over the sound of what were definitely not celebration fireworks. "Security breach," Marcus announced into his communication system. "All staff implement emergency protocol Omega-7 immediately." Which wasn't actually a real protocol name, but sounded official enough that everyone started following their emergency response training without question. Within seconds, the embassy's diplomatic staff had transformed into a surprisingly effective defensive force. Vex took position at the main security console, his by-the-book precision now applied to coordinating defensive systems that definitely weren't in any official manual. Perimeter defenses active. Lockdown procedures initiated. Captain Zara Nightwhisper seemed to materialize from shadows that hadn't existed moments before, her dramatic training suddenly very practical. Northern approach secured. Hostiles neutralized with extreme prejudice and appropriate theatrical flair. Even Pip proved unexpectedly useful, his small size allowing him to access maintenance tunnels and activate backup systems that larger species couldn't reach. Emergency power restored. All kinetic sculptures fully operational. And Tornak. Tornak revealed that hegemony drones weren't just engineers, they were engineer warriors, bred for combat in the depths of space. His disgusted grunts transformed into tactical commands as he turned the embassy's infrastructure into a weapon. "Hey, finally something interesting." The massive alien bellowed as he overloaded power conduits to create defensive barriers. These Federation types don't know how to properly fortify anything, but what followed was the most polite siege in galactic history. Ambassador Flixner continued providing diplomatic commentary while taking cover behind barriers that had previously been decorative planters. The various species representatives found themselves working together in ways that their governments had been negotiating for decades. "I must say," announced Senator Quibblex, an elderly Rigelian who was proving surprisingly effective with what definitely wasn't a ceremonial staff, "this is far more engaging than our usual diplomatic functions." Marcus coordinated the defense from his command post, calling out targets and tactical updates with the calm professionalism of someone who had always known this day would come. "Zara, we've got infiltrators in the East Wing. Pip, can you seal those ventilation shafts? Tornak, I need more power to the main defense grid." "These systems are operating far beyond specified parameters," Vex reported, somehow managing to sound disapproving even while operating weapons that weren't supposed to exist. "This level of defensive capability suggests considerable advanced planning." "You think?" Marcus replied dryly, then switched to the embassy-wide communication system. "All diplomatic personnel, please remain calm and continue following emergency procedures. This is just a routine security exercise with live ammunition." The attackers had clearly expected to face a soft diplomatic target protected by ceremonial guards and strongly worded protests. Instead, they found themselves assaulting what had somehow become the most heavily fortified embassy in known space. The kinetic sculpture gardens revealed their true nature as high-end defensive turrets, tracking and eliminating threats with artistic precision. The decorative barriers deployed into full military-grade fortifications. The emergency lighting system turned out to be a sophisticated target acquisition network. "How is this possible?" shouted the leader of one attacking group, taking cover behind what used to be a peaceful meditation garden and was now a crater. Intelligence said this was a minimal security target. "Intelligence was wrong," Marcus replied through external speakers. "This is what happens when you mess with a human's workspace." Ambassador Flixner, still maintaining diplomatic protocols even while coordinating evacuation procedures, managed to broadcast a message to the attacking forces, but the Galactic Harmony Embassy would like to formally protest this violation of diplomatic immunity. However, we are prepared to accept your surrender if you would prefer to resolve this through proper channels." The battle raged for 3 hours, with wave after wave of attackers breaking against the embassy's transformed defenses. Every system Marcus had installed, every procedure he'd taught, every aesthetic improvement he'd made came together in a symphony of controlled violence that kept every single diplomat alive. When the last attacker finally surrendered, the embassy stood transformed. Scorch marks decorated walls that had once displayed peaceful artwork. Broken barriers revealed the military-grade fortifications hidden beneath diplomatic facades. The kinetic sculpture garden still rotated smoothly, but now everyone could see the weapon barrels that had been there all along. "Well," Ambassador Flixner said into the sudden silence, "that was certainly eventful. I believe this concludes today's ceremonial activities." Marcus slumped against his command console, finally allowing exhaustion to show. "Everyone okay? Full head count?" "All diplomatic personnel accounted for," Vex reported. "0 friendly casualties. Hostile casualties minimal due to effective non-lethal suppression systems." "Remarkable," Senator Quiblex announced. "In all my years of diplomatic service, I've never experienced such efficient crisis management." Captain Zara appeared from whatever shadow dimension she'd been operating from, looking pleased with herself. I must admit this was far more exciting than typical embassy duty. Even Tornak seemed satisfied, which for him was practically euphoric. Acceptable defensive performance. Still think humans are crazy, but effective crazy. Marcus looked around at the controlled chaos of his transformed workplace and felt something that might have been pride. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various other configurations of sentient life," he announced, "welcome to the new normal." 6 months later, the Galactic Harmony Embassy had become something of a legend throughout known space. Officially, it maintained its reputation as a center for peaceful diplomatic relations. Unofficially, it was now recognized as the most secure diplomatic facility in the galaxy. It's staffed by combat-trained diplomats and protected by defenses that would make a military base jealous. Marcus sat in his new office, a reinforced command center that the building plan still listed as a supply closet, reviewing applications from other embassies requesting human security consultants. The demand had apparently exceeded supply by roughly 3,000%. "Congratulations on your promotion, Chief Rodriguez," Ambassador Flixner announced, entering with the kind of nervous energy that had become his default state since the Grand Unification incident. "How does it feel to be the first chief of galactic security?" "Terrifying," Marcus replied honestly. "Do you have any idea how many diplomatic facilities are going to need complete security overhauls? This job just went from impossible to mathematically improbable." The ambassador's nervous twitch had become more pronounced over the months, but his diplomatic skills had improved remarkably. Nothing sharpened negotiation techniques quite like having survived a 3-hour siege together. "I must admit," Flixner said, "our diplomatic effectiveness has improved considerably since the incident. When you can defend your embassy against coordinated terrorist attacks, trade negotiations become much more straightforward." Vex appeared in the doorway with his usual precise timing. "Chief Rodriguez, the daily security briefing is prepared. We have 17 new threat assessments, 43 facility upgrade requests from other embassies, and one concerning message about your next assignment." Marcus looked up sharply. "Next assignment? I thought I was permanently stationed here." "Apparently Galactic Command has decided your expertise is needed elsewhere." Vex consulted his tablet with the same reverence he'd always shown for official documentation. "You're being assigned to provide security consultation for Research Station Kepler 442. "A research station?" Marcus felt his danger sense starting to tingle again. "What kind of research?" "According to the brief, they study harmless alien artifacts from peaceful ancient civilizations." Vex paused. "The station is described as completely safe and requiring minimal security oversight." Marcus stared at the assignment details with growing horror. Alien artifacts. Ancient civilizations. A facility specifically described as not needing security. His last assignment had been advertised as the most peaceful embassy in the galaxy. "You know what?" he said finally. "I think I'm starting to see a pattern here." Captain Zara materialized beside his desk with her usual theatrical flair. "Did someone say ancient alien artifacts? How wonderfully ominous. I volunteer to assist with this obviously dangerous mission." "It's not supposed to be dangerous," Marcus protested weakly. "Neither was this place," Tornak rumbled from the doorway. "Look how that worked out. Humans have gift for finding trouble where none should exist." Pip bounced excitedly around the room. Ooh, can I come too? I want to see what happens when Marcus meets ancient alien technology." Ambassador Flixner's twitch intensified. "Perhaps we should request a replacement security consultant before you leave? Someone equally qualified?" Marcus looked around at his team, a by-the-book alien bureaucrat who'd learned to operate illegal weapons systems, a dramatic elf who treated combat like performance art, an enthusiastic furball who'd become expert at emergency systems, and a grumpy engineer who'd turned interior decorating into fortress construction. "I don't think there is anyone equally qualified," he said. "But I'm starting to think that might be the point." As he prepared for his next assignment, Marcus reflected on an uncomfortable truth about humans in the wider galaxy. They had a tendency to over-prepare for everything, assume the worst in every situation, and generally approach peace with the same intensity that other species reserved for war. And somehow, this made them remarkably good at keeping the peace. "Research Station Kepler 442, he muttered, already making mental notes about defensive positions and emergency protocols. Studying harmless alien artifacts. What could possibly go wrong? The question was rhetorical, but Marcus had a feeling he was about to find out the answer in excruciating detail. After all, in his experience, the universe had a twisted sense of humor when it came to the word harmless. At least this time he'd have a head start on the paranoia.